And so then, in May of 2003, I turned into the Blue Dragon and began to set off with Queen Rania, the Apocalypse Woman, and her child, who at that point was not yet named. And we were on a journey through the apocalyptic wilderness. And the strange thing of being the Blue Dragon was that, or is, rather, that perception is multidimensional, and the dragon mind operates almost like in a string theory type of multi-phase sense, and it has the ability to see many dimensions at once, and it only sees many dimensions at once for the most part, and I really have to concentrate to see like a person or a thing that you're talking to as the dragon. You have to almost like put on shades mentally, like sunglasses, to try to look at and interact with people. Most of the time it's a mind-blowing multi-wave perception. And Queen Rania was riding me, you know, like, the dragon's like 100 feet long, big blue scale dragon, and Queen Rania's at normal size, so she was riding behind my ears as we were journeying through the wilderness. And we journeyed on and on for a few months, and what happened is that she was telling me the plot about the Nabateans and about how they, the Nabateans who lived at Petra, and that would be one of our stops on the journey, how they had mastered some kind of quantum syncretic synthesis, as the Apocalypse Child said, that allowed them to find the last missing piece to the Great Game. And the Great Game is what humans have been doing since the destruction of Atlantis, essentially. And now it's finally coming to its conclusion. Its final phase in definition for the Piscean Age was the last confrontation. But essentially human history since the Reconstruction on has been about first finding all the pieces to this game. That was from 6 to 9, finding all the pieces to the Great Game, right? And then collectively trying to control, manipulate them, hoard them, and use them in contests for different elite groups and figures throughout history, from 9 to 12. And that's also, again, the pool of characters that Peter the Great drew from, and that's also the timetable of the Masonic calendar of life. Okay? And so now the Apocalypse Child is going to be the one who will find the key to making the new game in the Tower of Babel, which is where all these pieces eventually came from. But the imprint of it is still in the astral. And Sebek now haunts us as we make the journey. As I'm journeying as the dragon, Sebek is, you know, kind of popping up now and then with Persephone, Greek goddess of the underworld. And Hathor here in our iconography representing Persephone, the consort of Sebek. And Persephone then is the, let's say, the serious goddess cosmic forces that have been waiting for a worthy consort collaborator of my caliber, let's say. And Cleopatra has kind of scouted me, you know.
Really?
And now tipped off the real player, who is Persephone. Persephone is working on a serious agenda with Isis that has to do with, you know, the apocalyptic payoff. And as Sebek now, I'm her consort. I'm, you know, in other words, bringing the new scheme material to her overall plans and plots. New powers for her to use in her overall agenda, which is unknown to me now, but is becoming clearer, and it involves the implications of the apocalypse for all of the old deities, old gods, which are hanging around, of course, and still even kept semi-alive by the neo-pagans, etc. All these old gods are like outdated programs, right? And the gods are part of the game. The program for that game is all these gods. And the final programs are the monotheistic gods, which bring the game to a close, a final showdown. But the earlier form of the game, you know, involves the pagan multiplicity of gods, and now they are programs left over in the unconscious with nothing really to do, and have a curious amount of conspiracies with modern day, you know, contenders, let's say, for apocalyptic control. And there's a whole vast network, it appears, of old pagan gods working with modern-day apocalyptic conspirators. Okay. And there's a feeling, let's say, of magic in the air that is undeniable. And this Persephone connection now has the ability to really blast open all those hidden mysteries of the ancient Hellenistic era. Because the Persephone Eleusinian mysteries are unknown to this day. No one knows really well.
Wow.
It's the biggest unpopped quiff in history.
I see.
Unpopped quiff in history. And so I have the ability to pop it now as Sebek, the Lord of the Secret Underworld.
Oh.
And now Persephone is also connected with the Spiral Odyssey in a background sense. And I have a diagram of the Spiral Odyssey, which I will do, and we'll have another dialogue about it, about the diagram, showing how the Greek underworld is kind of like behind the disk of the Spiral Odyssey itself. And if you look at the Spiral Odyssey two-dimensionally as journeying through 9 stops, as we saw in the timeline illustrated, essentially stop 1 is the Middle Eastern Jerusalem Judgment City, okay, with all the other monotheistic cities in orbit around it, Mecca, Medina, Rome, and Byzantium/Constantinople/Istanbul. Okay, and then the second stop is Asgard, and that's at the top of the spiral. It's a spiral moving inward, so that was at the left, the Middle Eastern Judgment Cities at the left. Then Asgard, the Norse gods, is at the top, number 2. Then number 3, all the way on the right, was the Far East, the world of the Buddhists, the ninjas, the Taoists, etc., and the world of the dragons that I am. I'm a Chinese dragon, after all, in the whole.
What about the samurai?
Samurai as well were there in the Japanese kind of world, but I'll get to the details of the contact later. So that was number 3. Number 4 was the Native Americans and the Central Americans, the Mayans, the Incas, all that conglomerated into one big super city of monuments and islands that represent the native peoples. And also then, strangely, Australian Aborigines were also orbiting that island with an island of their own. Okay.
Nice.
And then stop 5, of course, was Petra, where King Abdullah reigns as Dusares, and it's in the Arabian desert, and the jinn are involved in secrets of the Nabateans. Then stop 6 is the Black Sea area, which is also home to a lot of the pirate characters that represent the kind of cosmic raiders, let's say. And Peter the Great, of course, also has his island in this area. And his fascination with the ships, of course, it's a whole Navy ships culture. The Phoenicians are there. It's very weird. It's a whole Black Sea kind of culture that incorporates other strange seafaring and Lemurian influences. Then, stop 7, of course, is in the Himalayas with the Hindu secrets, the Shambhala, Tibet, etc. That was stop 7. And then stop 8 is Philae, the Nile, ancient Egypt. And then 9 is ancient Babylon, which is also, of course, Baghdad, where the showdown is currently occurring between the red and blue forces. But it's also where the Tower of Babel is, which we entered and married, and I am now in. Now, backing up then, just to the individual steps in the 9-level map of the Spiral Odyssey, and how we arrived at all that. Preliminary to the arrival in Judgment City, just have to comment briefly on Persephone's tutelage to my dragon self regarding seeing the different timelines of the multidimensional vision in terms of a crop circle language. Persephone taught me about a crop circle language, because you must remember that her mother is Demeter, Ceres, and Cereologists are the people who study the crop circles, and it's the idea that the symbolic language of the crop circles is a goddess-endorsed linguistic symbol base alphabet to use, let's say. And Persephone suggested I use this in my dragon self to more effectively manage my multiple dimension perception. And it worked, surprisingly, and I gained more control over it, and I began to see the future and isolate certain timelines randomly, but just cautiously. And then in real life, when I wasn't the dragon, I was seeing future moments, if you recall. And they came true, if you recall. But, anyway, so we arrived at our first destination, which is Judgment City, after we make a shocking confrontation at a crossroads, because we follow in the apocalyptic wilderness, we follow through this, weird wilderness until we reach a place where two rivers cross, and the two rivers are the rivers of life and death. The river of death is the river Styx, leading into the Greek underworld, where Persephone is coming from. The river of life is the Jordan at this point, and this river scheme, as we go on each step, the river will change into the sacred river of that culture, i.e., it becomes like a sacred river, Ganges or the Yangtze River, or the Nile, or whatever. Okay, but the idea is that at each stop on this journey now, we're going to be following a different thread, let's say, a different type of thread. And beginning before we reach the first destination, we have this confrontation at the crossroads, and a few things happen. One is that we meet John the Baptist, who is killed in a strange ritual, and his head is consumed by my dragon self. And from that point on, John the Baptist is actually sharing the dragon body with me and helping me manage it, because I can't be there all the time, and in fact, I can't be there most of the time.
Wow.
Right, so he's managing it, controlling it, and we have the partnership to this day, where he's controlling the dragon body, and also we trade off with the armor. He uses the armor as well. But John the Baptist goes back to Nuog, and we had contact with him during Nuog, the spirit of John the Baptist, so he claimed. And so it's all tied in together, of course, with various threads of my life and recurring themes, but also at this crossroads where we meet John the Baptist, and he enters I swallow his head, and he becomes one with my dragon body. Then my dragon body dives into the river and follows the spirit of Mary Magdalene riding a dolphin. Riding a dolphin, to this crossroads. Because what happened at the crossroads when we were walking across on the dragon body, Queen Rania and I, and the dragon, Queen Rania and me as the dragon, rather, we confronted Dusares, who actually is King Abdullah in disguise, at this bridge, okay? And he let us pass after I gave the password of Lisan, which is the secret place in Jordan where
and that's the connection to the Bible code.
The Bible code, and where ancient treasures and cosmic secrets are buried in Lisan, right? And Muad'Dib from Dune is known as Lisan al-Gaib, the voice of the outer world, because it's voice or tongue, and Lisan means tongue. But anyway, so Lisan's the password. Dusares lets us go across the bridge, and under the bridge we see the two rivers crossing, and then we go down on the other side to where the rivers are, and I jump in after John the Baptist is killed and becomes one with the blue dragon. We jump into the river, follow Mary Magdalene back to the actual place where the rivers cross, and I dive down into the bottom and come up in this cave where I confront who? Ion.
Yep.
Carl Jung as Ion, the god of eternity, Mithraic god of eternity, the lion-headed, eagle-winged god with the zodiac around his body, okay? He symbolizes the whole zodiac cycle. And what happens then is that, he gives me a jewel, and there's a confrontation where he tells me, some secrets, and etc. And so it's like a weird initiation, right? Ion will pop up many times, and Carl Jung will pop up in a different form at each of the 9 steps. But this is like the 0 form, right before we begin. So it's 0, then 1, then 9. So number 1 then is Judgment City, which we arrive at next. And it's the Dome of the Rock, as we see here in our iconography. And it's a place where Queen Rania kind of holds court, and she is the goddess figure in charge of the energy or shard of that city, okay? And what's happening there is that there's a council interface of the Islamic and Jewish clerics and the Islamic characters are helping the Jewish characters
And interesting to
rise
note
out of their conflict and pain.
that this corresponds to the linear time of July 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when King Abdullah holds his Islamic conference.
Yes, indeed, that is
Yeah.
interesting because, right, as we move through the apocalyptic landscape of the Spiral Odyssey, we're actually moving in through regions that correspond to the future in linear time. So even though at that point it was only 2003, as the dragon moving through that area to Judgment City, we were actually moving through what corresponded to 2005.
Yep.
And the events happening there, shockingly enough, later came true in the mundane world with King Abdullah doing exactly what we had been seeing. I had been seeing. So anyway, in Judgment City, various events occur. One thing is that I inherit possession of the Solomon's stables, where my dragon body begins to use as a base. And there is like all the secret treasures of the Knights Templar, underneath the Dome of the Rock. Okay? As my dragon body, I inherit it, and I set free the spirit of Hugh DePayan, who had been trapped there. And DePayan gives me the Templar armor to use as well. Because on this apocalyptic plane, my astral body now is no longer accessible because it's mutated into the blue dragon. So I only have the blue dragon body on the astral plane up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
So by the DePayan giving me the Templar armor, now I can interact with the characters in this world at their level, at their scale, instead of as a 100-foot beast. So now I can interact with Queen Rania at her own scale in the Templar armor. So I then begin to spend most of my time in the armor and allow John the Baptist to control the dragon. However, one exception to that rule is when I meet Bruce Lee, Spirit of Bruce Lee in Judgment City, because he has a little shop. He's teaching his Jeet Kune Do importation of the East in the West, in the world of the West, which is what this Judgment City is. And so Bruce Lee begins to teach me how to use my dragon body more effectively in combat and how to use it to move more smoothly, to have more control over it. And he'll end up going with us on 2 more stops of the journey. He leaves with us from Judgment City. And also in Judgment City now, since I have Solomon's Stables, I'm in possession of it. There's a couple of things there that a few people want. Some people who want it, one group in particular, are the Nazis. Ghosts of the Nazis, led by Rudolf Hess, storm my Solomon's Stable treasure house because they see that the Payans left. They don't know I'm there. They storm the place. They tunnel through secretly, but I'm ready for them in my dragon body, and I imprison them. And Hess becomes my prisoner. And then who shows up to try to barter to get Hess free is Albert Speer. Right? That's how I became friends with Albert Speer.
Yep.
And I offered a trade-off. Speer was going to return to Asgard because the reason that the Nazis were so close to the Western world, number one, is because Asgard is stop number 2.
Yep.
The Nazis are in the annex of the Norse Asgard mythology world, right? And so they're tunneling into the Judgment City, try to steal my stuff from Solomon's Stables, right? And Hess fails, but Speer is sent in to negotiate his release, and so I agree to go with Speer on my way, because I have to go there anyway, on my next stop to Asgard, and I strike up a friendship with Speer. So we all end up leaving after we do a big tour of Judgment City, in which we meet a few characters, Shabtai Zvi, for example, who turns out to be the devil, right? A devil character who is trying to tempt the Jews and has successfully tempted many of them into despair. Also, the mad Caliph al-Hakim, who has his own plot level and thinks he's going to return at the end of 2012 and take over the Islamic world and hijack the world of the space gods. He's actually, al-Hakim is secretly puppeteering the assassins.
Yeah.
He is the head of the assassins. He created them, essentially, along with the warrior hashish freaks of the hills. He was their spiritual guru. He was Caliph at the time. And he had control over Jerusalem on and off during his reign, and actually destroyed many of the monuments. But what happened then is that in Judgment City, all these secrets about the West are then set up and revealed. Everything from King Arthur and Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the Knights Templar, Rosicrucians, the Prague clock, which we see here, the secrets of the Holy Roman Empire,
Yep.
Mary's connection to the Prague clock, You know, on and on and on. All that stuff plays out. And while we're in Judgment City, Sebek shows me the map for the first time that has the overview of all of the 9 stops on the Spiral Odyssey. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so eventually and then before we leave now, Mary and Michael Meyer, the alchemist, who lives in Golden Lane, which is annexed within Judgment City, with the help of the mysterious Blue Men, who I met through Bruce Lee. The Blue Men are beings claimed to be from 1 million years in the future, and one of them in particular, Viyama, befriended me and journeyed with me through most of the Spiral Odyssey, and had many strange connections with Queen Rania. And we have a secret, shocking, possible theory about Viyama, which we talked about the other night.
Yeah, that's right.
And we won't talk about that now, though. But so Viyama, Michael Meyer, and Mary build the golden coach for Queen Rania, and it's like a semi-sentient coach that's like almost self-aware, and it mounts my back and becomes a much more comfortable and splendid way for them to travel on the back of the dragon. And Mary, however, hooks up with the purple unicorn in Judgment City, and Mary rides the unicorn primarily from that point. Okay? And so all these adventures are beginning to happen in Judgment City. We move on then, I love you, to the Asgard events, where we all end up going to Asgard, and Bruce Lee gets in a rumble with the 2 Thors.
Oh, yeah.
Thor from Norse and Thor from Teutonic. And he takes their hammers, both of them, as he easily defeats both of them. And Queen Rania gets the second shard to the Nabatean gem by holding a secret council with Frigga, all mother of the gods, the Norse gods. I, on the meanwhile, visit Hela, the Norse queen of the dead, and Loki, who claims to be a relative of mine. And Loki takes me on a tour of the 9 worlds of Asgard. The 9 worlds, briefly, are Niflheim, the world of the frozen dead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then it's Nidavellir, the world of the dwarves. Then Svartalfheim, which is the world of the dark elves. Then Alfheim, the world of the good light elves. Then it's Muspelheim, world of the fire demons. Then it's what's the name of it? The world of the Vanir. Vanaheim, which is now who the Vanir. No, you know who the elves are and the dwarves are essentially.
Yes.
The Vanir. This is interesting. They're not gods, part of the program like the most of these characters are. But get this. The Vanir, who are another race of quasi-human gods in Norse mythology who are never explained. Well, I got the secret explanation. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Most of the Norse gods and the figures are part of the cosmic program written by the space gods that begins to run from, the years of, 6 through 12, right? The cosmic program of the gods. And most gods are part of that program, virtual reality program running in the collective consciousness of the planet. In the Norse mythology, however, there are these extra gods called the Vanir. And who are they? What they are survivors from Atlantis. And how did they survive? They knew they were going to die. Their civilization's about to be nuked, wiped out. So they transport their consciousness into a virtual reality interface with the space god computer that's going to be running the program, and they become a race of gods in the Norse version of the program, the Vanir. Mm-hmm. So this group of, let's say, a few hundred humans from Atlantis survive. They die physically, but they survive in the virtual reality world of the astral plane four-dimensional gods by impersonating another race of gods within the Norse mythology, the Vanir. And Vanaheim is actually their artificial interface that they built at the last minute during Atlantis, right? And so anyway, I had a tour through that, and then Asgard itself, which is the land of the gods, where the city of the gods, where they live, and that was incredible going to Asgard. For me, that was I was always obsessed with that as a child, And to be there was just amazing. That's where Bruce Lee got in the Rumble with the two Thors, and that's where Queen Rania visited Frigga.
Mm-hmm.
And then also Midgard is the final one. That's like the mundane world, astral city, corresponding to the unconscious of the German, Teutonic, and Norse peoples. And in the German region of that, Hitler and the Nazis took over and created their own city, Germania, Der Volk, also known as Der Volk.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where Speer and Hitler were living. In there. Now, Hitler has this crazy idea. Get this. Hitler's ultimate scheme.
Yep.
Crazy idea that he is going to somehow destroy the space gods entirely.
Really?
Through some doomsday weapon. Some ultra doomsday weapon that he claims to have. Okay? And Speer doesn't know whether or not it's real. So he can't tell me. But Hitler's plan is to try to take out the space gods. And that's his version of the Norse apocalypse, which is the confrontation between the good Norse gods, who Hitler sees himself as representing, and the giants, who are the giants, they're the space gods. And so he's going to try to annihilate them. I don't think it's going to work, and I think it's a vain, mad, endeavor. But you never know. That's, just a flip of the coin, perhaps. So you got to be aware of that. That's why I think that the Nazi element in the Norse mythology is very volatile. However, the Phrygia connection, which is not often talked about, is very strong. And Queen Rania has it all under control.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
So we move on anyway from the Asgard Norse mythology realm. Of course, there's more that happens. At one point I battled the dragon Fafnir in the world of the gods, the giants rather, which is Jotunheim. That was the last of the 9 worlds. And I battle Fafnir, and I get these Atlantean gloves that the dragons used to wear. And these gloves allow me to grab things from different realities and pull them in, right? And also do other things. They fit the dragon, too, the gloves. They're huge. Each glove is like the size of this room.
Wow.
Right? And they fit the dragon,
Nice.
And so... the idea then is that we go on to the Far East in step 3, and that's first we meet the world of the ninjas, like ninjas living in the hills, because the rivers, river runs first through these hilly island places, and it's like the Japanese ninjas and then the samurai. The ninjas are the antisocial in the hills, more chaotic. The samurai represent the ordered social order, establishment, civilization. We passed through there. I received a samurai sword to use with my armor, right, with my Templar armor, because I was using Excalibur, which had been loaned to me by King Arthur in Judgment City.
Wow.
And now I had also Excalibur and now a Japanese samurai sword. We also moved on to, now simultaneously when my armor self was in the samurai ninja world with Bruce Lee, Queen Rania and the dragon were in the world of the Chinese dragons, okay, in the Far East. All these 5 different realms in the Far East. The ninja/samurai world, the world of the Chinese dragons, the world of the Buddha fields, the world of Kuan Yin and the gods of Japan and the East, and then the strange, shocking, almost like a evil anime world of the Japanese unconscious that was shocking and disturbing.
Really?
Yeah. Schoolgirls getting raped by tentacle beings and that kind of thing, A very shocking, strange world. And so, anyway, we experienced, Bruce Lee and I experienced the ninja world. He actually stayed with the ninjas. And then I went on into that shocking anime world in the armor. Meanwhile, I was with Speer as well. Speer and I and Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee stayed behind in the ninja world. Speer and I went on into the anime world, right? Confronted these weird tentacle beings. Speer had some errand that Hitler needed accomplished. Hitler had some errand. He's doing some bartering with these tentacle beings that are like demons out of Japanese nightmares, okay? And meanwhile, in the world of the Golden Dragons, my dragon self, under the control of John the Baptist, is with Queen Rania and Mary and the unicorn, and they're learning wonderful things about the dragons and the dragon kings. It's like dragons, have a hierarchy, and these emperor dragons give me the crown, and I become an emperor dragon myself, and that's like you graduate to the level of mastery of your dragonness, I guess you could say. And that was primarily through my mastery of the gloves and other things, right? And so then Queen Rania and the dragon, Mary stays behind in the dragon world, but Queen Rania and the blue dragon, myself, under the control of John the Baptist, but I was switching off with Beth the Baptist at this point. I was actually controlling the dragon at this time. We go to the world of Kuan Yin, who is the Buddhist goddess of compassion. She's also a part of the Japanese gods that bridges with the Chinese gods, right? And she gets the shard from her, right? And then we move on to the fourth world. I'm going to keep this kind of brief here as I go. I'm not going to get into too much detail. Fourth world is the world of the Americas, and that's where we meet the natives and the super complex of the Mayan pyramids and stuff, and that's where the goddess Columbia is the goddess resident there, the spirit of America.
Yeah.
And she gives Queen Rania the shard there. And that's where, as the dragon, I see the spinning calendar. Remember when that actually was happening?
Yep.
That was actually happening at one point. I was here.
Yeah, sitting, yeah.
Yeah, and it was so shocking that what was going on. I couldn't even think about it. I just tapped in just for a moment to what was going on. It was shocking. It was just, the dragon was looking at this Mayan calendar spinning, and the spinning of the calendar, each position of the spin was a different possible future. And to even look at the calendar as the dragon, I was threatening to collapse it and create futures for myself that I'd have to deal with the implications of, so I couldn't even look at it consciously. As the dragon, I could look at it, but Steve would tend to collapse the waves with my limited perception. It's almost like a pressure on your mind to look and focus and collapse the wave, right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't let that happen, so I couldn't be part of it. I had to then unzip it later, which I'm doing now even. And so anyway, we moved on from there. There was also contact with a strange Australian shaman figure. There was an errand that went, while my dragon self was in the Mayan world with Columbia and Queen Rania, Mary and the armored self and Albert Spear and the purple unicorn were on the Australia island seeking out some Dreamtime shaman, right? And there was some kind of connection being set up that may involve the dwarves and the gnomes, now that I think of it. Mary's connection to the gnomes and the dwarves could be something to do with Australian shaman figures. They naturally would be able to see the gnomes and interact with them, right?
Wow.
There was something going on there that I can't even remember right now. It's so vague, I haven't unzipped it yet. But there's big connections and implications now. We'll talk about that more with little people. So anyway, moving on from there, we next went to Petra. Stop 5, confronted King Abdullah as Dusares.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
He's all impressive with his, he's got like a magic belt, and he can pull out an infinite variety of different swords and daggers, right? As Dusares, he has the weird robes, and he has the rings. He has 10 rings, King Abdullah.
Yep.
Each ring controls a different type of jinn. Fire and air jinn. Fire in the left hand, jinn and air in the right hand. The fire demons are mostly power, the air ones are mostly knowledge. So he has 5 different types of knowledge, 5 different types of power to call on from the Arabic, pre-Muhammad Arabic bloodline. And then also at Petra, he has the tomb of Aaron and the connection to the Jewish patriarchs. And he has, of course, the prophet bloodline. He is the descendant of the prophet, and he has control. It's interesting because it's his descendants. The fact that he's a descendant of Muhammad gives King Abdullah the ability to control the jinn of the desert, in the same way that Muhammad was able to cleanse the Kaaba of the pagan gods, and how in stories and legends, and in the Quran it talks about Muhammad taming the jinn. And talking about how they'll be, during the apocalypse, they'll be brought under control by the savior figure who King Abdullah is, the Mahdi.
Yep.
King Abdullah is the Mahdi in a neo-Mahdi sense. And so, the goddess figure that Queen Rania got the shard from there was actually an Ishtar type of Nabatean goddess. It was a goddess whose name escapes me right now. It was a Nabatean name for it, but she was also Ishtar. It was like a Persian Ishtar type of character. Because there was a Persian and Egyptian and Greco-Roman influences all intersecting at Petra.
Yep.
Right? And this, goddess figure gave the shard to Queen Rania, and there was a strange ceremony of the jinn conducted by the king, in which Mary was given some kind of investment, because Mary's naming ceremony had happened in Judgment City, which we must remember now is near, it's like directly to the left of the Petra, because the way the spiral closes in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a back and forth, I think, between Judgment City and Petra, and then Petra in Iraq as well. There's a rock to the right of Petra. So anyway, from Petra then we moved on. One thing about Petra, though, with King Abdullah is, again, I had the feeling that there's secret chambers in Petra, the actual ruins. Astral chambers. I saw him go into things like the treasury. I went into the treasury with him, and it was a much vaster complex of secret chambers that was revealed. And the Nabateans, who knows what they had, I think there's big unknowns that nobody's suspecting.
What do you think?
I think also that the tomb of Aaron, that mountain, is hollow, as I said, Mary gave me the clue. But also we know now, and I think this is a solid fact, that the space god flyby, when they stop to get the plan handed off to them, it'll be at the tomb of Aaron. In other words, the ship will touch down, let's say, at that point. And that's like the gods, the giant hand of the gods reaching down to Earth, right? And the humans are reaching up from that point. So it's like the king and queen there will be standing, and you and I perhaps handing off the Cosmic Congress approved program.
Yes, I see.
You see? And so Petra is important for many reasons we don't even know yet. We'll discover all that soon after we go there.
Mm-hmm.
But continuing on, it was the strange world of the pirates, okay, after Petra, number 6. And Peter the Great pops up again, shows up with his big fleet of ships, and there's also pirate characters from legend, and also, as I say, Phoenicians, Carthaginians, all the famous sailing cultures, right? The Dutch as well.
And where is this stop exactly?
It is in between
Black Sea area.
And in terms of the spiral, it's directly underneath Asgard, again, directly above the Baghdad, Iraq, Babylon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And the goddess figure there was Cybele, who was a goddess of those Black Sea the peoples that at the time of like Alexander were called the Parthians and the Phrygians, right? They would later become the kind of Black Sea dwelling Circassians and all that, right?
Oh, I see.
You see?
Yep.
And so their goddess is Cybele, right? Now, what happens then is that we go to the Tibet, Hindu, Himalayas area, right? And now during the, just to back up briefly, at the Peter the Great place, it was basically the dragon swimming alongside all these ships, and then in the armor, again with Albert Speer. Albert Speer's UFO, of course, is accompanying us throughout all this as well. And a lot of times, me in the armor flying in the UFO was Speer. That's how it went down. And so Speer and I actually at one point parked his UFO on the deck of one of Peter's huge ships. And we went back to his island and we had, the magical party time, while Queen Rania and the dragon went to the island of Cybele, which was another part of the Black Sea pirate area. And then we met up again together and we all went off to the Himalayas. And in the Himalayas area, where the Tibet monuments were, Shambhala, I actually, with Speer, executed the mission that we had made a deal with Hitler earlier, right, at stop number 2. Because what happened is that Hitler's former right-hand henchman in the SS, Himmler, who was fascinated with the Himalayas and the whole myth of the Aryan race in the Himalayas, right? He had actually betrayed Hitler in their afterlife and fled to the Himalayan region, left the Asgard region, fucked Hitler over in some way, and had a ongoing afterlife romance with H.P. Blavatsky, right? Himmler and Blavatsky, hiding out in the Himalayas. And so Spear and I abducted Himmler, and Spear took him back in the UFO, took him back to Asgard, right? And I didn't see Spear again for many months because he was dealing with all that back in Asgard. And I was left to deal with Blavatsky, and I had a wonderful time with her in the Hindu secret theosophy region of the Hindu area.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, indeed, talking about the cosmic and the different formulas. I was in my armor, right? And so that area, then, the goddess figure there, ironically enough, was Kali.
Wow.
Right? And there was a secret...
The
dark goddess underneath the mountain of, like in the top of the mountain, this mountain, theoretically mountain, it's like a symbolic mountain, the mountain, right, of the Himalayas. At the top is the monastery with the Hindu monks, okay, the Tibetan themes, and then within that is the European colony where Blavatsky and Himmler were. And then there's a secret chamber leading down into the depths where the dark Hindu goddess Kali is worshipped by the thuggy, kind of, very scary, spooky characters, right? But Queen Rania fearlessly went in there and confronted them and got the shard.
Wow.
Yes.
Brave lady.
Indeed. And so I helped Spear bag Himmler. He took him back in the UFO. Then in the armor, I continued with Mary on the back of the unicorn. Meanwhile, all this time, Viyama, the blue man, is riding in the coach with Queen Rania. And Kadir, the angel, the Islamic angel, who's been, he's shown there as symbolically as the angel. He gave Mary his name. The naming ceremony at stop 1 of the Spiral Odyssey, and he had been with us the entire time. Kadir kind of guarding the coach and making sure the queen's protected, as well as, he has some other functions that was unknown. And, of course, Al-Hakim was popping up here and there, puppeteering various aspects of things, ranting and raving in his mad way about how he's going to be the Mahdi and dominate us all. And, Queen Rania has a very diplomatic approach to Al-Hakim. She can't isolate him because of his importance. She can't confront him at this time because it's not the right time. So she's taking a very diplomatic and measured approach, and okay, that's fine. That's nice. And she's very calm and patient with him, much more patient than he deserves. But so then, after the Himalayas, we end up in the Egyptian Nile. Big surprise, the goddess shard there comes from Cleopatra and Isis. And it's the predictable Isis refuge. Kind of like that's the last stop before the big battle in Iraq, so it was kind of like a safety refuge review, where Queen Rania and Isis were having their connections. And so then finally, after we get the shard there, we all end up in Babylon at the center. This is where the forces of the red and the blue, Bush versus Bin Laden, the assassins versus the Templars. Templars are the red Bush team, the assassins are the Bin Laden team. And they're all, confronting, I'll wrap it up now. They're all confronting each other in the apocalyptic showdown. Meanwhile, Queen Rania is establishing a kind of, secret base, let's say, with the goddess figure, okay, of the Babylon. And the goddess figure from Babylon is Inanna. Right?
Yep.
And there's a whole secrets of the space gods when they left the flyby of the number 9, right?
Yep.
And there's a whole plot level of that. And there's stuff that's, very detailed about the Tower of Babel, of course, where Mary and the unicorn and my armored self end up going, okay? And Queen Rania now is working with Inanna on some kind of scheme, preparing for the, return of the space gods for whatever. So that's the general summary then. I'll get more into the details, of course, but that's the 9 stops of the Spiral Odyssey. And now just to briefly sum up, all this takes place over the period of the year, leading up to our wedding. And we'll stop from there, and then this addendum, there's some new cosmic stuff that also went on from our wedding forward, then leading into Julian and my Freemasonry, well, all that stuff, okay?
We'll get into that next time.
Alright, for now, let's just zoom in on a couple of figures here, namely Queen Rania, the most beautiful woman, aside from Barbara, Empress PSP the First, and just also Mary the Apocalypse Child. Here he is. And as well, Sebek, Lord of the Secret Underworld. Kadir as the Angel. And Hathor representing the Persephone figure. And the Prague Clock, secret conspiratorial timetable device, and what we're going to do with it, how it's going to be manipulated, all that will be revealed in the future.